Welcome. This is the Enlightenment Show, and I'm your host, Laurie Schoenfeld. This is where Chicken Soup for the Soul meets the artist way with Nancy Drew. Our guest today is one of my dearest friends, Dara Levan, author of It Could Be Worse. We're going to be chatting with her today all about her new release and something she's learning about letting go. Hello, Dara.
Hello, Laurie. This is such a treat. Thank you so much for having me on your show. This is just amazing and it's like a pre-launch party.
It totally is, because tomorrow is your release. How are you feeling?
I don't know. I'm really excited. I am I don't want to say in shock, because obviously this has been the book of my heart for months and months. But it's so hard to believe it's actually here, kind of like a wedding day or a bar mitzvah or a baptism or anything like that. We're so excited, and then it's here. And I think for an author, as I am learning, and I'm so lucky to have interviewed so many as well on my podcast, the whole letting go piece is huge. And that's such a life lesson for me in general. So it's been a really interesting process.
Can you share with our listeners and viewers a snippet of what It Could Be Worse is all about?
Sure. Thank you for asking. So It Could Be Worse. It takes place in Miami, and it's about a woman named Allegra who suspects that her charmed life may be not all that she thinks it is. She has an amazing husband, Benito. He's Jewish Cuban, which I share this called Jubin. It's a thing in Miami. And it's really neat. It's a very specific sort of, I don't want to say culture, but it's really cool. So he had such an interesting dynamic. She has two amazing children. She's a therapist. So you see her thriving in her therapy practice. She helps other people, but she has such blind loyalty to her parents that she doesn't see how perhaps the people who raised her could also be people that are harming her. So I would describe it as a book about acceptance and awakening, but not necessarily forgiveness. She has some really tough choices to make to break a cycle. It's also, at its core, I would say it's really a story of unconditional love, loving yourself and your family enough to have the courage to make really difficult choices, and loving generations ahead, that the choices she is forced to make will have a ripple effect for future generations.
What are some things that first came to you before writing this book that you wanted to put in the book?
Things? What do you mean exactly? Like scenes? Do you mean topics, characters?
It could be scenes, topics, any of that. Like the first few snippets of things, maybe within your character or a feeling, emotion, memory, anything.
That's such a great question. No one's asked me that. I love that. What came first, unquestionably, was motherhood. It just felt so important to me to not just describe, oh, this is what being a mom is like. I mean, you can read a blog about that, right? You can read how to expect when you're expecting. I don't know if you read that. I read like a million mommy books, right? As if you can really prepare for it. But anyway, so that was really important to me. And that's where kind of the idea gestated about unconditional love. And what does that look like? Mothering, being mothered, and how family can not just be what we're born into, but also who we choose and who we don't choose. And so at the core, that became a really important theme. The other part that was so important to me, and it makes my heart smile. Anyone that knows me, and I've talked about this incessantly with you offline too, anybody, is Interlochen, which is a performing arts camp that I attended in Michigan for 8 summers. And it's such a part of who I am as an adult. So in the book, definitely Camp Intermezzo is in Michigan. It's definitely inspired by Interlochen. And this beautiful friendship, again, speaking about unconditional love, between Allegra and Ruby. They meet in camp. It becomes her lifelong bestie. It also becomes her support as a mother. So we see them in all these different phases. And so I really wanted to explore, what does unconditional love look like? Because that's different for everyone. And it's a universal need or a want that all humans hope to have. And many of us don't. And then if we don't, how much are we willing to tolerate? And how much do we decide that no longer serves us? And also, another big theme, something I really wanted to explore, which I did, I hope, is what lies beneath when things look like they're perfect, a perfect parent or a perfect sibling. We can apply this to anyone, a perfect husband, a perfect wife, perfect partner. Nothing's perfect and nobody's perfect. And so what's beneath that? And when that is revealed, what do you do with that?
I love so much the topic of motherhood that you had in this book, because my oldest is 16 now. And your book reminded me so much of what it felt like. It was almost like replacing me back in that stage of being pregnant and having a newborn and all of those concerns, fears, worries, things that you have to figure out as you go along, that you feel like nobody told me what's happening kind of moments. But then also questioning the stage of where she is now and what do I want her to see within me as a mom? Teach her the value in healthy relationships, respect for yourself, unconditional love, and what that looks like. And you brought both conversations from a decade or two within the book of being a mom in different stages, and what does that look like, not only for you, but for those that are watching you as well.
I'm so glad you noted that. That's so insightful, Lori. And that's true, because as a former speech pathologist, and that's something I always used to teach parents, and I still teach and preach it to my own kids. I'm sure they love that because they're 19 and almost 22. I really, really, really believe it's not just what we say as parents. Children learn what they live. They're watching us. They're seeing our nonverbals. If they see us rude to a cashier at a grocery store, even though mom might always say, oh, you have to always be polite. Well, if mom isn't polite, it's so hypocritical. So that's that's another theme in the novel about, it's not just about setting boundaries and making tough choices. It's deeper than that. Allegra's children are watching her. And, part of the decision she decided to make along with her husband was very much, hey, if we allow, I don't want to ruin the story, X, Y, and Z to continue, then what are we teaching our children? What are we modeling for them? And as a mom, that's definitely something I always think about quite a bit. I dig deep with that. I always tell my children, they've made me such a better person, because I'm so conscious, like, what am I saying or not saying by doing or not doing this? And it's kind of meta. A lot of times are like, you're so hard on yourself as a parent, and it's true. But I feel like we've only got one shot or two, or however many children you have. And, I just want to raise good humans. And Allegra felt that way too. That was so important to her, about just making sure her kids knew they were loved.
What were some traits and qualities that you loved most about Allegra and her character?
That's such a great question. She's quiet. She's gentle. I think that she's obviously very intuitive and empathic, as I would hope most therapists are. And in my research, I found that as well. I spoke to several psychologists and psychiatrists about narcissism. And, I love how she loves her kids, and I love how she loves her husband. I love it. And I love how she gives love and is love. And what I mean by that is, even though she didn't have that model growing up, I kind of wanted to explore that too. We could become like our parents or whoever raised us, or we can go the complete opposite way. And sometimes that's a choice. Sometimes it's chance. Sometimes it's both. And I love that Allegra really just pours her soul and her light and her being into anyone in her life that loves her. And she loves fiercely.
She absolutely does. I just got chills when you said that. She definitely is all fierce and loyalty and love.
But somehow blindly loyal, right, Lori? And that's part of what the challenge is. She's not seeing what's right in front of her. And I hope the reader is seeing it, and certainly other characters see it very clearly. And she's just like, no, if I love these people, I will love the hate out of them. I will love XYZ out of them. And so love is supposed to conquer all, but one of the questions I hope is something that arises when people read my novel is, does love really always conquer all?
That's a powerful question too, Dara, is the conversation on loyalty of like what we're loyal to a fault and when to actually say to let go and release, of when it's okay to be unloyal, to be able to love yourself even more.
And is it unloyal, or is it living on your own terms? Is it living your truth, which is a key message in my novel? And, I really hope readers feel inspired and empowered after reading it, that it can apply to their lives in whatever setting, because this is universal. This isn't just exploring a parent-child relationship. It can be applied to someone that's going to feel stuck in a marriage. It could be applied to a work setting where you might have a boss that it's just not acceptable how you're being treated. And are you loyal because you keep going? Or is at one point, I learned a term as I was researching this called dysfunctional loyalty. It's a therapy term, and I didn't know about it. I know a lot about therapy stuff just because I'm interested in therapy, and half my friends are therapists. I love helping professions, but it was fascinating because dysfunctional loyalty is where you're loyal to a fault, to your own detriment, to your own health, to perhaps your family's health, your friends, whatever. Again, you can apply this in a more generalized sense, and it really struck me. That's something I really wanted to explore deeply in the novel, is how loyal is too loyal? At what point are you being selfish or selfless? There's this polarity where we all go through this, right? In different ways. It doesn't matter what the specifics are. I think it's the emotion behind it. And how do we make these choices? Sometimes we can never get out of that relationship or that situation or that work environment. What if you're a single mom with 4 kids and you're the only one that can put food on the table, but you have a really abusive boss? What do you do? And those are the kind of questions that I asked myself as I was drafting this book. So I really wanted to personally explore a specific area, but I feel it really is applicable to so many different situations,
Yeah. Yes, absolutely agree. And you bring a lot of different, questions and messaging within that offers the reader suggestions of things to look at from a different perspective, which I really, really appreciated that as well for my investigative heart.
Oh my gosh.
What did Allegra, do you think, was she most surprised about when it came to motherhood?
What a great question. I think she was surprised at the lack of or support she didn't receive from her own parents. I think in her mind, she thought, it's like all rainbows and unicorns. I have kids and I have all this support, and without ruining the story, that wasn't quite the case. But still she persisted. I think obviously one of her births was really intense and very shocking. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate because it's not uncommon. So certainly that would have surprised her. I think she was also surprised that breastfeeding isn't just an easy thing and everything just flows, literally and figuratively. That was a surprise. And again, I think relatable. I experienced that for sure. It was really hard. And all this pressure we put on ourselves as women to just be this and do that. And I really want people to feel like motherhood doesn't look only one way. Parenting in general, really,
Yes. You brought a lot of key elements of musical terminology all throughout your book, which my musical loving heart very much appreciated it.
I love that.
How has music impacted your life?
Oh, I could talk about that. How long do you have? Oh my gosh. Well, I started going to Interlochen Arts Camp. I'm from Miami, and I started in 9 years old. And those 8 weeks every summer, I went for 8 summers, were transformative. I knew it at the time, but not the depth I know now as an adult. So music, I've always found healing. Music was my outlet. I sang in choirs. I sang in operetta, Gilbert and Sullivan. I music elevates my soul and sort of shifts my spirit when I need it. And even in times, even like in high school, I was the girl listening to Chopin and Mozart. I mean, because that's normal. But I would also listen to AC/DC. I mean, I love the whole gamut. I love music as a mood. And it's also like, interestingly, as musical as I am, and now I only sing in the shower or in the car, by the way. So my range is maybe one octave, if that. But for me, it's interesting. When I write, I cannot write noise. I cannot stand any sound. I'm so immersed in my characters and how they're guiding me. And I know a lot of my friends love to write in coffee houses or blast music. To me, that's like nails on a chalkboard. I like complete silence. And so my music, when I write, is the melody, the cadence of the words, of the prosody of the characters, what they have me do. I mean, there are some moments in this book I'd step away, as I would advise any author to, when you're drafting, and I come back and say, I wrote that. It's like, have you ever experienced that, where you just look at a paragraph or a scene and say, is there a ghostwriter? What just happened?
The musical terminology that you had in your book felt, because of the way that you wrote it, it was just so beautiful and lyrical in so many pieces, but it felt like it had its own song throughout the whole story. I can't explain it. So those who read the book, I'd love to have this conversation after on how it really feels like its own song. And I have to say, so the second time that I read your book, I could hear your voice reading the book to me, which I found so fascinating. Like, I could hear you reading the chapters. I'm like, it's in your voice. It was so awesome.
Oh my gosh, that means so much to me, because, as you know, so much we talked about in our craft is developing your voice. And that means the world to me to hear that, Lori. That really touches my heart. Thank you. Musically, I don't know if you picked up on this, but this was intentional. And I'm not aware of any books that were written this way. And I didn't do it for that reason. It just felt right. Mm-hmm. So I wrote it with the cadence of a waltz, up, up, down, up, up, down. So the chapters were present, present, past, present, present, past, because to me, that mirrors a journey of healing, physical, mm-hmm. emotional, mental. We all take a few steps forward and a few steps back. And so to me, that felt so reflective of not only the musical theme throughout the novel, but Allegra's actual journey, because she would sort of awaken and maybe start to see something and go, no, 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 no. And don't we often do that when we start to see something in somebody and it's so painful, or it's so shocking, or it's so unbelievable? And then we may step back and go, no, but it's okay. They didn't mean to. That's okay. They weren't aware. And that might be the case, but when there's a pattern repeated, and there's patterns in music too. So there was a connection there too. Mm-hmm. It's happening in music. And
I love that, because I loved your chapters flowing back and forth between the present and going to the past. I thought that was so profound how you did that, because that is healing, of like opening up and being willing to open up to the space of looking at snippets at a time of memories and then trying to come back into the present. But now that you say that with the beats, I didn't pick that up, but I can completely see with the beats. That's brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I do believe, like, in my next novel, there's music. And something else I realized as these characters kind of develop themselves, as I mentioned earlier, I was a pediatric speech pathologist. I've edited several books. So it's almost a return home. When people say, wow, did you just start writing? I'm like, no, I've been writing my whole life. But a novel, no, this was really new for me. And I delved so deep and researched and read how to write story. And finally, a good friend of mine in 2021, she said, you just have to start. And I said, but I want to know perfectly how to do a character arc. And I need to understand, what exactly does it mean? Everything has to move the plot forward. And I was an English major, but still, it's different studying it than crafting it. So, oh my gosh, I got so consumed with like studying. And so finally I started the thing. But what happened was, I realized, as much as I know for sure that creating, and I say I'm a creator because of the podcast, because I love photography. And I'm at my core, and first and foremost, I'm an author. For me, that's also include, I love to create. I love sharing images on Instagram. It just brings me joy, and that I hope also brings it to others. So I say this because I started coming back over and over in my speech therapy background. And Allegra obviously has a speech challenge, only with a certain person. And in my next book as well, there will be speech and language challenges and disorders represented, because I don't see that in fiction, or I haven't personally. I shouldn't say it doesn't exist. That's an unfair statement, but I haven't really seen it. And I feel like because of my background, I feel so passionately about seeing that representation in different ways, because again, without ruining the story, the way it manifests for her is a bit unusual, and it's manifesting that way. I hope to teach without being preachy or, professorial, that the way we speak, the way we communicate can also be a reflection of what perhaps could be going on internally for us. So,
I am all for that. And voice, we talk a lot about voice and the importance and messaging that goes behind the lack thereof, or ways that it shows up. So I'm excited to see more of that piece from you.
Yeah, thank you.
Why do you think that people feel guilty about grieving?
Grieving a relationship, grieving a death, grieving what?
Just grieving any loss.
I don't know from that. I don't know the answer to that. I would say, I'm not sure what you're asking exactly, but I would think I can answer it in relation to this novel, perhaps.
Yep.
I don't know if you want it in relation to the book or you want it just in general, but
either way is great.
In relation to Allegra's journey, I don't know if she felt guilty. She felt extremely conflicted. She's a good girl, she's a pleaser. I think there's a grief. I can go a bit deeper with this. That's where my heart's leading me. So I feel I don't know if there's a guilt, but there's a not allowance, perhaps, of allowing a person to feel and to process and to accept what might never be. And so there's the grief of a loss of a physical being when somebody passes. There's a grief of miscarriage, a life that was never even born yet. There's also the grief of people who you thought they were. I mean, I've had this in friendships recently, and I thought this person, I've known them for years, but I keep excusing and keep saying, no, they didn't mean it. No, they didn't know. And it's enough. And so there's an internal grief. I think when you really care about another person, you grieve. There's this, but you need to allow yourself. And I think sometimes it's hard. Perhaps I guess I don't go to guilt. I guess that doesn't resonate for me. I think maybe it's allowing, maybe it's giving yourself permission to say, I'm grieving, like this hurts, and that's okay. And let me feel that, because grief sucks. It hurts. It's searing. Oh, it's like lighting a torch to your heart. And who wants to do that? I mean, it's not a party.
No, it is definitely not. No. I love how you brought in the word there's like that self-acceptance piece, and allowing yourself to sit in the grief and flow into however it needs to feel within your body when you are in that moment of loss.
And you're so good about talking about that. Oh my gosh, when you share on your Instagram and about your own process, it's amazing. You're so inspiring, Lori, because I have a hard time sometimes accessing my own grief. I think partly, is even gratitude. Sometimes extreme emotions, I need to complete, again, it's the silence thing I'm really connecting with. And as mothers, as just living in this insanely overstimulating, busy world, I think it's also, and I hope this isn't a kind of circular way answering your question, just coming to me. I think that we have to create space that I don't believe 10, 20 years ago was as difficult. I think that we always need to create space to process, all human beings. But I feel like we're so on now, everybody's got something to say, needs to be answered. There's this expectation of responding right away to an email, to whatever. And I think that when it comes to grief, and letting go, which I think go hand in hand, we have to create that space, and doing that is a very conscious act. So that takes effort, that takes time, that takes awareness. And I think some people don't have that awareness. And I think any change, whether it's a speech and language, whether it's emotional, you can't affect change without awareness. And so that is another kind of key component here with what Allegra struggles with. She's very aware. The people that she has to make some tough choices with, they're not, and they never will be. They're not capable of it. And that's a grief too, to that acceptance of who you think someone is, who you want them to be, and who they might never be. And so where do you fit in that relationship, no matter what the relationship is? Do you accept? Do you remove? Do you do both? I mean, I think there's so many shades of gray. I don't think it's an all or nothing answer.
The grieving the living, there's a lot of layers of that.
Yeah.
Really
hard.
How did Allegra create new memories for the ones that she lost?
Create new memories for the ones that she lost.
With her grandparents specifically.
Oh. Okay. So her grandparents play a big role in her life. And, it's interesting you asked that. So her grandparents really, I think, became a legacy for her through maybe perhaps a vessel, a nourishing like fuel through which she loved and parented. So it's almost like it skipped a generation, but she kept them alive through tradition. Allegra's Jewish. Her husband, like I said, is Juban. I wouldn't describe Allegra at all as religious in any way, but definitely spiritual, very connected to knowing there's definitely life beyond just what you read in a book or what you can touch or feel or see. And I think she really got a lot of that from her grandmother. The sense of belief in self, and it's so interesting. So she's obviously she's plagued by self-doubt in the choices she has to make, but I wouldn't call her someone who isn't confident either. You know what I mean? She's fiercely confident in almost every area of her life, except one. And so that's a really big struggle for her as a character, this push-pull, this forward-back, this up-down, like the waltz.
Grandmas are so special. I love that section too, because it reminded me of my grandma, and they are a special piece of bringing that joy and connection in a completely different way for legacy.
And history, right? There's like a history there. There's this sort of lineage, this ancestral lineage that I hope readers feel. And I know the grandparents, they don't appear often, but the scenes they do, I hope and feel are really impactful. They really impacted her life in such a profound way. And it really framed a lot of who she was and is, or I don't know, is, right? It's weird. We talk about our characters. I find myself saying things to my husband. I said, he's like, what are you talking about? I said, I'm sorry. I just had an idea for something Allegra should say to Benito. And he's like, what? I said, I'm like, forget it. Oh my gosh. It just, you get so immersed in the story. What about that? One of our favorite phrases, I'm sure yours as well, or questions is, what if? I mean, that's been one of my favorite questions since I was probably 2. Also, why? I always want to know why? And so my little brain just keeps exploring, and I'm just so curious about humanity.
Our curious Gemini hearts just love investigating on the whys. Yes, and what ifs.
I just love it. It's just, I'm just so curious about the world and humanity and just people. Fascinating.
Why do you think it's important for us to create those boundaries around unhealthy behavior to change the cycle within our own families?
I love that question. I think first I'd say, and I learned this a lot through my research and even my own life experience, that boundaries have this like yucky, I think it's shifting in recent years, but the word boundary was like the F word, you say boundary and it sounds like you're telling someone to beep, beep off, and no, actually boundaries are self-care. It's important going back to an earlier question, which I love, you reference how we model for our children. So if we have no boundaries, we're kind of saying we don't matter. If we're saying we don't matter, then aren't we sort of indirectly teaching our kids, well, you don't matter. And when you're a parent or you're a spouse or you're a partner or you're a friend. So, and it's hard, I think it's so hard to say no. I think for a lot of us, saying yes is so much easier. Just, you avoid the conflict, no conversation. But it's really important, especially in toxic relationships. And something I always say to my kids, because, the middle school drama with my daughter, I'm sure you had that. It's really, really fun. Yeah. Lori's like, no, hard no on that. And, something I'd always say to her is people who need the boundaries the most will resist it the most. That's like your big kind of red flag. And I've noticed it in my own life, even with a friend where someone I've never said no to just because I just believe in being kind. But also I realize you can be boundaried. That doesn't mean you're not kind. You need to be kind to yourself. So setting boundaries is actually self-love too. And if you don't do that, that trickles into other areas. And for Allegra, she just kept thinking, well, I can, so I will. But that doesn't mean you should. Right? It looks like that's resonating with you.
Yes. Well, we've talked, there's a lot of layers within your book that I really just sat with because they related very well to parts of past Laurie. So that was fun to be able to say, okay, we've learned this piece, which is great. And then also parts that I'm like, oh, yeah, we still have some space to look at here. And that's okay too.
Oh, don't we all? I mean, honestly, I think if we're not evolving, we're dead or totally not awake, which I think is a sad existence. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that they just think they're done growing. And, I feel sad for them because that's not what I feel this lifetime's about.
Always growing and learning all the time. But I find that exciting. That's just my personality. I'm ready.
Bring it.
Yeah. What else am I going to learn today?
Exactly. I'm right there with you. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You have a podcast called Every Soul Has a Story. Tell us about that.
Well, thank you for asking. You were a guest on it many moons ago. That feels like forever ago, doesn't it?
Many moons. Yes.
Wild. Yes. I'm entering, I guess, my 5th season because I started in 2020. And I'm so grateful. I've interviewed the most extraordinary people. And really, Every Soul Has a Story is about the extraordinary and the ordinary. And what I mean by that, I believe everybody has a story. Some people just don't know it. Some people don't think that their story matters. And I believe everyone deserves to be seen and heard. And I've interviewed, as you know, many, many authors, which is kind of morphed into that simply because that's my world. But I've also interviewed jewelers, cancer survivors. I interviewed this beautiful soul at the Miami City Ballet about coming out, what's like to be a dancer, and then retiring. What do you do when your body was your world? So it's really an exploration and a safe space. It's inclusive where I've had people cry. I've had people share things. They've said, oh my gosh, I've never told anyone that before. And I feel it's such a privilege and an honor that people have trusted me in that way. And I really feel so grateful for that. And I'm glad you asked about that too, because it's interesting. In recent weeks, I've had several interviews and people have said, what has inspired you to write this story? And I really sat with that question, so many things. But one of the things is many of my guests have shared about their trauma or, there were stories about resilience. And I really think some of that I've learned from that. And I thought, I really want to dig deeper into this in a fictional world. So I'm so, so thankful. And I don't take a minute for granted with people that share their stories. It's really an honor to be able to be that vessel and to just listen.
It's a beautiful and inspiring podcast. So we'll send a link down below. So after the show, you can connect and find more episodes with Dara because it's absolutely empowering, inspiring, and beautiful conversations all around.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, my friend. And I loved our conversation as well. Was still one that I remember often. So thank you for having me.
Me too. And thank you for your open heart.
What would you say is something that you're learning currently about letting go?
Oh, where do you want to start on that one? Well, what area of my life are we talking about letting go that my book baby is in the world tomorrow morning? And that's one area for sure. Letting go of expectations, however it unfolds, letting go of how it will be received. I have no control over that.
Mm-hmm.
It's scary as hell. At the same time, that's part of the artist's way, right? I have so many friends in the arts, whether it's painters, dancers, vocalists, whatever it is, and I feel writing novels is definitely an art form. And, I was thinking about it because the Oscars last night, they were talking a lot about story. And I thought about our talk today and how you cannot in any way control how things are received. So for instance, it's been fascinating. Like on Goodreads, I'm getting all these wonderful reviews and a few not, which that's normal and that's fair. Yeah. And I'm fascinated by what's most resonating with people. It seems like the breaking the cycle and motherhood. And yet for me, I loved writing Ruby and their friendship, and not many people have commented. I'm like, what? You're not seeing that? It's shocking. And then Jack, Allegra's brother, who is one of my favorite characters. He is amazing. I don't know how much to say about him, but he plays a very important role in illustrating the toxic, unhealthy family dynamics. He also plays an important role in showing up and what unconditional love looks like as a sibling, as an uncle. I mean, I love him so much. Nobody's commented on him. And I'm sitting here as an author saying, is anyone relating to these two characters that I'm in love with? Like, I was so sad to leave them, So that's so interesting. So again, letting go of what I think people will love or what I feel will move people's hearts. I have no idea. And that is just simultaneously like exhilarating, exciting, and totally frightening. Like, it's the weirdest feeling, I just like pour my soul on the page. And it's been it's really transformed me. The whole process. It's been, I feel like a completely different human being, not my values, not who I am as at my core, but just, if I even think a year ago, this really, I feel as an author, you have to go inward. You don't have to. It's my experience. If you really want to write authentic characters, they come from your heart also. There's tons of research. It's a collective. You pull on, like I said, my guest in every soul has a story, but just like characters on a stage or a dancer using their body, if it's relatable, if it's authentic, if it's emotively connective, it really should come, in my opinion, not just from your head, but from your heart. And so I think even if I wrote sci-fi, which I don't even know the first thing about, I think still letting that go, you just don't know how your work will be interpreted. And that letting go has really been such an incredible kind of challenge, lesson, and personal growth involvement. It's been really something.
We're going to take it to the inner child question segment. Are you ready?
Oh, okay. What are we talking about?
All right.
First, yours, Allegra's. Tell me.
You. This will be all about your inner child.
Oh, dear.
Are you ready?
I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know what's about to come out of your mouth, but let's go.
Letting go. First question.
Yes.
What sense did you enjoy in your childhood or remind you of your childhood?
Oh, well, those are two different questions. Which one should I answer?
Whichever one you're leaning to, go.
Okay. I can answer that in two ways easily. The smell of wet leaves, specifically pine from camp. The minute I smell pine, or a campfire, we could be in the middle of nowhere. My husband and I in 2020, we started going on the road. We should have wrapped this van and I call it Levan, by the way. Not even kidding. And every time I smell a campfire, I'm like, and he'd say, oh my gosh. Again, I said, yes. Those are summers. And then I love the smell of challah. It reminds me of my grandparents. They lost so many people in the Holocaust. There were 9 children on my grandmother's side. Only 5 of them came over. I never know what happened to the rest of them. We assume they perished in Poland. But she was always lit the candles on Friday night. And again, I wouldn't say she was really religious, but I remember her soft hands. I remember smelling the challah. Like whenever I smell it, and I don't eat gluten. This is the irony, people. I haven't had gluten in like 15 years. So that smell brings chicken soup, same thing. I'm very sensory. So that's a great question. I mean, I could really go there with the smells. The smell of the ocean also. I love the smell of the ocean. It reminds me of walks on Sundays and the weekends when I was a kid in Miami. I used to love that. We go to brunch and then we go for a walk on the beach. Or it was, lots of smells. Yeah, that's an interesting question.
I just took a walk with little Dara with that visual. That was so fun.
Oh, that's so sweet.
All right, second question. What brought you joy as a teenager?
Unquestionably music and my books, and definitely my friends. My friends were and still are so important to me. I mean, they're my family. They always have been. And also making people laugh. And that's still the case. I love to make people laugh. I mean, that I will carry on, especially if I'm stressed or someone else's. What comes out of my mouth will not happen here. I love to make people laugh. I love to make people smile. And what really, really brings me joy, I mean, I guess you're saying as a teenager, but being heard. And I feel I didn't really know it then, but as I reflect on my life and even on this question, someone showing up fully brings me joy as well as showing up fully for someone else. And I guess it's a high value for me. I didn't really know it, but even as a teenager, I think back to my favorite friends or my favorite relatives or my favorite teachers. It was always the people that listened, that were like quietly present. It didn't mean showing up with a gift. It wasn't that. It was just knowing that I was heard and understood. And I think that's a very basic human need. But I guess as a creator and a creative, I guess that's why camp also was so important to me, because I was with people from 60 different foreign countries. And we have this universal link of the arts. And there was something like when you show up for each other, when you're performing, you have to show it. Listen, you cannot not show. Oh, wait, let me try that again. You really have to show up for each other, because if you don't, you're not cohesive. Just like an orchestra, you can't have one of the violinists just decided, I'm going to take a nap right now. I'm just going to pluck my strings and make a banjo out of it. I mean, it just doesn't work. So showing up and being present is something that is so important to me in all areas of my life. And I think even as a teenager, I would say yes.
I love that.
No, it's my truth.
Third question. What is the oddest food combo that you've liked and tried, or you've just tried?
Oh, that's easy. From my childhood, ketchup and rice. I was obsessed with it. Isn't that disgusting? I know.
Ooh. So did we blend it? Was there some stir action, or just like squirt
and
then
go? Squirt it, and the rice would look kind of pink. I could actually visualize this. I don't know why. I would always do that. I was like, it was delicious. Why? I think of it now and I'm like, it sounds dreadful, right?
Was this white rice, brown rice?
White rice, 100%, like Uncle Ben's, like the more instant, gross, the better. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Totally loved it. Loved.
Do you enjoy it now, or was that just a love when you
it sounds nauseating. Oh gosh, no. But I love kale now. I crave kale. I know that's bizarre. I love kale. I love really fresh spinach. Like seriously. Oh my gosh. I love dark chocolate. I don't know. So that's really probably the weirdest combo I could think of. Yeah.
I haven't heard of that before. So yes, I will go try that and let you know.
Yeah, let me know how that works out. That was like 12-year-old Dara.
Before we end today, can you share with our listeners and viewers what living a creatively abundant life means to you?
I love that. Feels very Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert. I love that book. Oh, for me, and again, this has really been such a beautiful unfolding of my creative spirit those last few years as I've drafted my book, and I've been working on book 2. Actually, it was in my head 3 years ago. I wrote an outline. just allowing yourself to feel, allowing yourself to create, allowing yourself to say, today's not the day to write. Creative abundance too, for me, is exploring all different areas, not just words. I love words, but I love to orate. I love conversation. As I said earlier, I love photography. I'm not joking. I have 110,000 photos on my phone. I might have like 50 pictures of a dragonfly, and I love sitting with a dragonfly, or rather capturing that moment when it allows me to capture it, because they never sit still. They're always flitting. And so I love light, and I love being behind the lens. Again, whether it's photography, whether it's my phone, it's meditative. And it really I get ideas. I don't even realize it. I think it's like subconscious. Creative abundance also is trying new things. I never thought I'd write a novel in a million years. I mean, it came out of my mouth one day. I was telling somebody else this recently that asked about it. And I was driving my daughter to school when she was younger. And I think it was like 2019. I don't remember. And I said something like, yeah, I have to start writing my novel. She said, what? I said, what? She said, what? I literally, I almost pulled over. I was in such shock. I was like, me? I was an arts reporter. Novel schmovel. I've had a whole children's book series in my head since I was practicing speech therapy, literally 20 years ago, it came to me. So that'll happen at one point. But a novel, and then all of a sudden this story just kind of took on a life of its own, as you know, as a novelist. And I just think it's so powerful. Creative abundance, also how I'd answered that, is allowing ourselves, opening our hearts and our minds to other possibilities. That also ties in, I guess, to letting go of how we think things should be or shouldn't, and just kind of seeing what happens.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. It has been such a treat to spend some celebration time with you.
Thank you. This is so special, Lori. I mean, thank you for having me. Thank you for your incredibly insightful questions. You really made me think, and I love that.
You have a full week, the next few weeks. Let us know where you're going to be.
Well, physically, emotionally, or mentally, or etherically. How would you like me to answer that?
Another episode on.
Well, I will be all over Instagram. Speaking of which, social media I had avoided for years. I'm so grateful I finally embraced it and stopped being fearful of putting myself out there. I'm very private. And as you know, I've been more and more opening up, and I post more of my face. Before I was like, I'm not posting my face. That's ridiculous. But I wouldn't have met you and so many beautiful souls. Feel so supported and connected with our author community. I've met such amazing, amazing, amazing people. I mean, so I love that you're doing this. So you'll see me a lot on Instagram and Facebook. I also have a newsletter. I have a Substack. Anyone to subscribe, you can get more personal updates there. I will be speaking all around the country. Actually, I have 3 events this week in Florida. One tomorrow night is kind of a celebration. And then I have an event on Wednesday in Fort Lauderdale. And then I'm speaking at Books and Books in Miami. If any Florida folks are listening, please come. That's on Friday. And next week, I will be in LA at Zippy's Bookshop. So lots of exciting. You can check out everything else on my website, daralevan.com. And I love when people reach out. I respond to every email. So I love hearing from readers and listeners. And that's the story.
Put all those links down in the comments below so you can connect easily to Dara and see where she is to be a part of her journey the next few weeks. Thank you so much for those who've joined us live and will join on the replay. Remember, as you go about the rest of your week, to find the things that are working for you. You are the creator of your own story. What steps will you take next? Thank you, everyone. Congratulations, Dara.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. Have a good week.
Thank you.